So welcome to the Muslim Women's Panel, Celebrations and Challenges. My name's Claire Chambers from the University of York, and it's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here. I want to start by thanking the organisers, especially Qaisra, a dear friend, and I was here last year and it was great, but it seems to be going from strength to strength, MACFEST this year, so it's really exciting to see what's been achieved in such a short time. Often I think presenters on panels at cultural festivals are given very different speakers, and it's the job of chairs or moderators like me to find tenuous connections between them. So congratulations to MACFEST to putting together these three speakers who, they have obviously unique aspects, but also a lot in common. Not least amongst these shared aspects are the way their stories will inspire you, particularly the women and girls amongst you, but not exclusively. So I don't want to yoke them together where this doesn't fit, but together and separately, I really want to discuss their diverse, exciting and nuanced bodies of work. So I'm going to give brief introductions to each speaker just so you know who everybody is, if you don't already, and then we'll have a conversation before opening up to you, the audience, for your questions and comments. So starting with Qaisra Shahraz, who is a Pakistani novelist, a peace activist, and Executive Director of this wonderful festival, MACFEST. Pakistan-born, Manchester resident, she is a very popular and highly acclaimed screenwriter, educationalist, novelist, and short story writer. She is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, and her novels have been translated into many languages. She's very well known in Germany, in Indonesia, in Turkey, and beyond. And too many achievements to list, really, but in terms of her novels, I'm sure a lot of you know The Holy Woman, then there's Typhoon, Revolt, and then recently The Concubine and the Slave Catcher and Other Stories, which I was proud to give an endorsement for. I mean, I've read all her work and it's beautiful and very rich. Then moving to Siddika Juma, who is an East African artist and creative producer. Art has become almost as essential to her as the air she breathes. From having her first painting published in a newspaper at the age of 8, to her biggest and most successful paintings, such as Diversity, when she wakes up each day, she says the first thing she does is go down to her studio and thinks about what she's going to create that day. She writes, "There is no greater thrill and no greater freedom than having a blank piece of paper or a blank canvas and filling it with whatever is in my mind. I usually have a very clear image of the type of picture I want to create, and then, once I have my idea, I simply place my hands in the space of God and see what happens." And Juma spoke very powerfully and wonderfully in the panel before last, and her art is on display, which we're very honoured to be able to look at. So I urge you, if you haven't already done so, at the end to really gaze at these beautiful paintings. And last but not least, Yvonne Ridley is a British journalist, broadcaster, and author of In the Hands of the Taliban. And I've been absolutely gripped. I'm 3/4 of the way through, and I almost couldn't break off to come and share this. So I really urge you to read anything that she's written. I'll be chasing up everything else as well. Yvonne was elected European President of the International Muslim Women's Union in special status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations at their 2010 conference in Lebanon. Her long career as a print journalist saw her working as a senior reporter with several well-known British newspapers, including the Sunday Times, the Observer, the Independent on Sunday, and the Sunday Express. While working for the latter as chief reporter on an undercover assignment in Afghanistan immediately after 9/11, she herself became the subject of international headlines when she was held by the Taliban, and that's obviously what In the Hands of the Taliban was about. So there's plenty more to be said about all three of our speakers. I had a lot more written, but I think it would be much more interesting for you that I now go a little bit more quiet and we listen to everything they have to say. So I wanted to just start with quite a simple question just about the way that the three of you work. Do you have a set routine? Do you have any rituals or traditions that you do in order to write, in order to paint? I mean, this was covered a little bit this morning. I mean, a few hours ago with Juma, but I would love to hear more about what helps you to write, what maybe hinders you to write or paint, any music you might listen to, do you prefer silence, how do you work, first of all? Maybe start with Juma, because you've already looked at this a little bit.
Okay. This is, I have a studio, and my aim is, you know, when you visit established artists, when they have these wonderful spaces that they call their own studio and so on, it all sounds very wonderful. However, with me, although I have a studio at the bottom of my garden, where I paint is actually in my kitchen, in my lounge, in my dining room, because, you know, I am a mum. I care for my parents. I've recently moved my parents to my home. My mother is unwell, so I've moved her to my home. And you know, painting to me is like everyday life. I paint a bit while the stuff is cooking. I go and put a bit of salt and then get back to painting. So it's life punctuated by painting rather than painting apart from life. So it's my everyday. It's not anything that I do which I take time off to do. And for me that really, really works, because apart from my painting, which is my passion, I absolutely love it. I keep going back to it, and I just quickly do something so I can go back to my painting. But it is part of what I do, which is I love my other life, which is be a mother, be a grandmother, be a daughter. So, you know, as women, you know, I'm not saying that men don't do that, and they should, but for me that works very, very well.
That's great. And does the studio get use nonetheless?
Well, the studio's become my house, really. My house has become my studio. It's everywhere. If you come to my home, there's paintings everywhere, there's paint everywhere. And in fact, I look after my grandchildren. I've got a grandson who is 3.5, and just the other day I was saying, you know, you've got to eat your food, because then you're going to grow up really, you know, big quickly and so on. And she goes, well, when I grow up, can I have a board, an easel? He calls it a painting board, like you, so that I can paint. So it's all part of living. So I do feel sorry for my family, because it's everywhere.
How about you, Qaisra?
First of all, very interesting to hear about you. It's similar in some ways. The fact is that you don't have a set office. I don't have a set office. Never pretended to have a set office. But I think I'll talk about the different phases of life. I've gone through different phases. There was a first phase in my 20s, 30s, when I first wrote The Holy Woman. Where do you think I wrote? Can you believe it? In bed. Sunday morning, Saturday morning, by hand. In those days, there were no laptops. I would write them by hand. I would send them to John, who was my typist. He would send them back to me, and then I would be doing. I'm a wonderful husband who's sitting there, would bring my breakfast and tray on Saturday morning. And my 2-3 children, they were young at that time, they would play around my bed. That was a routine at that time, because there was no internet. I was an executive director of MACFEST. All I was able to concentrate was the writing. I lived with my characters day and night, and I fell in love with them. The Holy Woman I loved so much in that process of writing, that when it was time to let go of that manuscript, I felt it was like my baby. My baby had gone, my 4th child had gone. And so much so that I was ready to start my 2nd novel, Typhoon, and suddenly I just didn't want to let go of it. And then I had a brainwave, and the brainwave was this. There's a village in The Holy Woman, there's a village in Typhoon, so why create another village? Why not make Chiragpur, as Chiragpur in there, and take my characters with me? That was then, at that moment in time, when I was a real writer, totally creative, given to my writer's world, where I fell in love with my characters. What happened 15 years later? Totally the opposite. With life, with time, you progress. I progressed in my teaching education career. I worked as an Ofsted inspector, as an educationist, as a quality manager. And my last job was as a quality manager, where you manage the quality of about 20 centres in this city of Manchester. Now, if you've got a job like this, do you think I've got time for writing? So that phase was the worst phase of my life. I was writing Revolt, and I'll show you the book as well. So here is Revolt. And you know what? I found the process of writing this book a revolting process. It's a lovely book. I loved writing it. But the process was this. I was stuck on it for 9 years because there was no time to finish it. And when I went back to it, I couldn't remember the character's name, never mind falling in love with them. And when I looked at it, I thought, my God, what rubbish have I written? And then I sat on it for 3 years. So that was then, took me 9 years. Then at this moment in time, while we're on the subject of writing, it's a totally different ball game. MACFEST, this thing, has taken over my life. I feel I'm a freak, sort of a fake writer at the moment. I've not touched my 5th novel since the last 2 years, and I can't even think of even remembering the characters because I'm a different person, different type. And at the moment, if I do manage to write anything, which is very rarely, my best place still is, like you say, in the kitchen. Mine is on a sofa. My volunteers will tell you that's where I do everything else. I've got a desk, I've got everything else. But it's where you feel comfortable. Your home is your world, basically. I'll stop there.
Yvonne.
Well, my ritual is 3 cups of really strong coffee on a morning, listening to the news up until 9 o'clock, and I live on a remote farm, so I have the animals to feed, and I'll usually just jump straight, into my Wellington boots with my pajamas on and feed the animals, and then once they've been fed, I've been fed, I'm up to here with news and caffeine. I then de-stress through writing. And at the moment, I'm working on the 2nd in a trilogy. The first is coming out at the end of January. And fiction is much more challenging than fact. And you'll appreciate that, Qaisra. It really is. But I do most of my writing in my bedroom or the lounge, and I've got a cat that comes in now and again that interrupts me. But other than that, no interruptions.
Sounds so beautiful. I'll be coming down to yours to paint.
Yes,
Well,
I think that sounds like the life I'd like. So I'll be over.
A few friends have said, why don't you have a writer's retreat or an artist's retreat? And, maybe it's something that I could think about because although I don't mind the isolation, when I do get friends coming round, it's really refreshing to share it with like-minded souls. Mm-hmm.
It sounds very productive. You two both spoke about some of the challenges. It sounds like maybe in this place that you have, it's a bit more like Virginia Woolf's room of one's own that you can create with only the animals as a kind of bind that you have to feed them.
Yes, it really is a productive atmosphere. But it's quite irritating when my husband will sort of see me on the laptop and he'll say, when you finish playing, can you come over and do this? And it's like, I'm not playing, this is my job. And unfortunately, when people do see you with a laptop, they tend to think that you're just doodling around. I don't know if you get the same when you're there with your brush and canvas.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. When you finish painting, when are you going to get a real job?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I add to that as well? I remember about my own father. I had a career in writing and a career in education, but it was my education.
Can't hear you. You need to speak
But
into.
it was in my education career that my father valued more because that brought the money in.
Yeah.
Ofsted inspection brought the money in.
Yeah.
And with writing, he kept saying, well, what have they paid you? What have you got for it? So there is always the side of the financial side, that is because we're never properly paid, people don't take it in the same respectful manner as they should. Mm-hmm.
Actually, that was a question I had about the business side, which got touched upon in your panel, yes. Siddika, about the sort of being your own project manager and the logistics of having a creative life. I think that's quite refreshing to be talked about up front, because a lot of festivals sort of create this mystique around art and culture. So I guess a follow-up, how have you found the making money side of things? Is it something that comes naturally? Is it harder or easier in a digital age? Are parents really starting to see art and families see it as more of a viable career? Or, there are still these, like my husband jokes, that it's not real work. I think he doesn't quite think that, but he often says, all I do is have coffees and doodle on my iPad. So yeah.
I've got an agent, and she goes onto all, the grubby side of things, while I just focus on writing. She keeps order in my life. She keeps my diary, works out the logistics, and when it comes to money issues, she gets embroiled in that, and that's her business. She runs a successful agency for individuals like me who just panic at the sight of a spreadsheet or an accountancy form or a contract. So it's horses for courses, really.
But what about you do tweets and things, so you've got a public profile. Is that for pleasure more than kind of getting the, you're pretty well known, obviously, but...
Yes, it's, I would say the social network has now become a necessary evil. If somebody said, take 5 days off from tweeting, Instagram, I've now joined this thing called TikTok, to my daughter's disdain. That would be great, but it all feeds in. And it's a bit like marketing. You know that only 50% of marketing only, works, but you're never quite sure which 50% it is. So I have to keep going on the social networks, on Twitter and Instagram, and promoting my work. And occasionally getting embroiled in spats. In fact, I've developed different personalities. On Twitter, I'm quite aggressive. Yeah. It's very fast and furious, and I do get very short-tempered and aggressive on Twitter. On Instagram sort of brings out the more cultural side of my activities, and Facebook is quite a nice, friendly discussion. I've got a good group of followers who, we don't always agree, but we enjoy discussion. So Facebook is more in-depth than Twitter and not as vicious.
What about you, Siddika, the business side of things, social media?
Well, I think creatives, especially like myself, shouldn't be allowed to, because we more than likely we're awful at discussing money or the business side of things. And I'm very lucky that I have a business manager who deals with, and I think if you see that if you are going to be successful, you need someone behind you. Because generally speaking, just speaking about myself, our head doesn't seem to work in that kind of atmosphere. So whenever it comes to anything to do with spreadsheets, it would just make me think, I'd need to shoot myself. It's really, I wouldn't be able to do it. But what's really interesting is, this is one thing that I brought up. I was very lucky to win an award in Florence. And it was an amazing time when I could say, I won an award for Islamic art in the sort of the heart of artistic, and I was asked to give a speech, and I was not prepared because I never am prepared. But nevertheless, one of the things that I instinctively said, and I believe that more and more, is that when it comes to art, for instance, one of the things that we've got to equip the emerging artists, the people who are going to come through this, with business skills, because we're really, that's something that we fail and we fall on so miserably. So yeah, I'm lucky to have a business manager, but otherwise I'd be awful at it.
Qaisra, you've touched on this a little already by saying that there's a lot of distractions that there weren't in your first phase of your career. But could you talk a bit more about all these kind of questions around practicalities?
Okay, certainly. First of all, I can say about Siddiq as a manager, he does a good job. He's persistent. Yesterday he said, right, is she in? Is she in? I said, yes. Okay, so I have two sides to the social media side. One is a positive aspect. I'm a peace activist, and this festival is part of that. So I use social media really actively. I've got a team who use it, where it's great to promote it. But as a writer, it killed my career. When my novel was being published, Revolt, a few years back, the publicity manager from my publisher said, oh, Qaisra, you've got to start promoting, put this on. And I was a good girl, I really was. I said, yes, of course, I understood. It's my book, I want to promote it, and I did it. But there was another writer being published at the same time. And you know what he said? He refused to do it. He said, it's your job, I'm not doing it. And I thought, isn't this silly man? Why is he not doing it? It's his book, whatever. And then later I realized, I thought, good for him. He's refused because he said, I'm a writer, I should be writing. Because what I find now, the problem is, social media, like all of you here, I'm sure, have the same problem. It's taken over my life. Whereas when I wrote The Holy Woman, there was no social media. I went on by hand, in my head, fell in love with the character. Now, Twitter's on there, on the laptop. Facebook is there. 1 minute I'm with my chapter. Next minute I'm answering my email. Next minute is Facebook. Total distraction. So really it's destructive. I've actually done panels around the world on this. And look, pros and cons. It destroys quality of writing. Now the business side of you, how shall I say, I'm not very good at it, but I had to learn something about it. As a writer, you don't make much money out of it. I've been mainly dependent on my education career, which has been good. But then running a festival from scratch, I had to learn everything. I didn't even know what a business account was. I've never applied for funding, filling in that form. So for me, it was a hard way at the deep end. I suddenly had to manage spreadsheets, income, expenditure, apply to Art Council, they want this, they want this. And suddenly I had to build all those skills and everything else. And you have to learn something else. I'm not perfect at it, but it's been quite a challenge. One of the hardest part of this festival, you see the nice part. The worst part is trying to raise funding, writing so many applications. It takes weeks, days, months. It's a horrible task to do. And then it has to all make sense. So I just wanted to add that for you.
You mentioned the peace activism, and there's the spread honey, not hate slogan. And I know, Yvonne, you're a peace activist as well. I guess to all three of you, you've got this shared interest. And I wondered if you could speak about how you feel your work might build bridges, especially in a very divided time that we're living in at the moment. So, Siddika?
Well, a lot of my work, as you know, is about unity. It's about bringing people together. It's about engagement. It's about letting everyone have a stake and everyone have a voice. And especially with the work that I do, which is of participative art. I'll give you a very quick example. When I was in an exhibition that I had at Brent Cross Shopping Centre, I did something called Make Your Mark, where everybody had the Kaaba in the middle, and everybody was putting a mark to create the humanity, the different diverse backgrounds. There was a lovely gentleman, a Jewish gentleman, who sort of was hovering around and wanted to sort of find out what this was all about. So I said to him, would you like to make your mark? And he went and said to me that, we are cousins in faith and so on. And it was lovely, and it was beautiful to have that dialogue. And I think that brought us together on a level that would be difficult if it wasn't for the art. So that sort of thing is the kind of thing that I feel my work, or anyone who's doing this sort of thing, is doing. It's just bringing conversations. From my perspective, from your perspective, from everyone's perspective, And that way, you know, we can speak about it and we can listen as well what they have to say. So yeah, that to me is my form of just creating that space.
Great.
Yeah.
Qaisra.
Okay. For me, it's become my main career at the moment. The writing, to be honest with you, I've not done anything for the last 2 years. It's on hold. For the last 15 years, my whole life has been taken over by connecting communities, bringing communities together. I won awards for this work. Last month, we had a special project called 24 Hours of Peace, where they heard the stories of 100 people. I was one of them, where they focus on that sort of work. So for 15 years, I've been member of Faith Network for Manchester. You will see that on a poster. I'm a trustee of We Stand Together. And then this festival came as a result of that work. And it came from the idea of after the arena attack. We talked about Islamophobia. This is a reaction to Islamophobia. I've been trying to, through my work, interfaith work, We Stand Together, trying to promote positive messages about Muslims and Islam, bring communities together. When the arena attack happened, overnight my life changed. There was 2 friends in Oldham, and they were afraid to come to the vigils in Manchester. Why? Because there were Muslim women wearing the scarf. They thought they would be attacked. And that's when I went out of my mind. I thought, this is unacceptable. Every time an attack happens, every Muslims feel attacked. I mean, why is it the actions of a nutter, an extremist, and you have extremists and nutters in all faith? Why is it we are all having to pay the price for this? And that day was a defining moment for me. I said, enough of holding banners only, writing on Twitter, whatever. I want to celebrate being a Muslim. And that's where it came. And then I had 3 missions. The first mission was bring Muslims and non-Muslims together. Second mission was, as you've seen by this festival today, bring the different Muslim communities together. When do we ever, Pakistanis meet the Nigerians meet the Turks meet the Somalis? Never. It just doesn't happen. So that was the other mission, is actually have it in one place so we all connect together and all the barriers disappear, all the divisions go. And the third mission was for schools. If this is how we're suffering as adults, imagine what it's like for children in schools going through this phase. So for me, this is my life, my everything for me. I live it day and night, 24 hours a day. My volunteers will tell you 7 days a week. And this is it. Writing doesn't matter anymore. Education's careers disappear in the background, because I think this work is so vital in this current moment in time, because Islamophobia has tripled and tripled and tripled. We really need to bring communities together.
Yvonne, a piece.
I would endorse what both Juma and Qaisra say, because you know, MACFEST is a great unifier. I mean, just this little strip at the back here, bringing together all these different communities. We've heard so much on the news, well, maybe not enough, but so much about the plight of the Uyghur community. I spent 20 minutes at their table looking at things that I haven't seen on the news, looking at culture, looking at pottery, looking at artwork, looking at food that is made and created by the Uyghur people. And this is a side of the community that I've never seen before. And it's an important side, you know, apart from trying to get a message out there that this culture and heritage is under threat at the moment. It's just so important to see how individual and how wonderful and how creative the people are. So, you know, well done again for bringing this festival to us. And when you bring people together, they will talk, they will have the same concerns. It's usually peace, security, education, health. You throw politicians into the mix and you start to get problems. And really, perhaps we ought to be holding our politicians to be more accountable. And we've seen an escalation and a de-escalation in the matter of a week where, you know, quite frankly, I didn't know whether the event would be cancelled or not because of World War III breaking out. Happily, events have cooled down again, but it shows how quickly they can escalate, and these are dangerous times for all of us, regardless of faith. So,
You've had the help of it, haven't you?
yes, well, you know,
through that Afghanistan experience.
I've been through the killing fields of Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine, and I can tell you that when bodies are blown up, you can't tell the difference. We all cut, bleed, hurt, suffer pain, and so that's why I think ordinary people do want to come together, do want to reach out, and I was amazed and impressed at the way in which Manchester dealt with the horrendous terror attack a couple of years ago. It could have broken a community. Instead, it made it stronger, and you know, today we've got this wonderful literary and cultural festival. So, you know, big high five to the people of Manchester.
And I just want to pick up on what Qaisra was saying about Islamophobia. You talked about the tripling, this spike that we're seeing. I wondered if any of the three of you want to say a bit more about how Islamophobia might impact on daily lives and your creative practice?
Well, happily, on my remote farm, I don't come across any haters, although I have experienced it because I used to wear a full hijab, and I had, when I was walking through London, I had a man screaming at me saying, "Why don't you go back home?" And I looked at him and used my thickest Geordie accent and said, I do try and get back to see me mam pet, but that easy. And he sort of looked. But it made me realise, you know, the hijab, any woman who puts on the hijab is immediately propelled into the front lines, short sword fighting in defence of Islam, because you are immediately identified as a Muslim woman. And this is why hate speech is so frightening, because somebody can listen to, sadly, our Prime Minister calling women letterboxes and looking like bank robbers. This is picked up by an idiot who walks out, and the first person he might bump into is a woman wearing a hijab who's going about her normal business, and the red mist descends, and in a knee-jerk reaction he can shout, or even worse, physically say something, all because of careless rhetoric, because of hate speech. And, you know, we are in a tinderbox situation, and it mainly is Muslim women who find themselves in the front lines. And, you know, we've seen it with images, YouTube, from the London Underground, from public transport, even to incidents breaking out in supermarkets. And it's so sad. But if you stop the haters and actually get hold of them, and why are you saying that? They're angry, not with Muslims, but they're angry at the poverty that there is in this country, at the hardship that people are enduring. And one of the most inspiring stories I heard came from your neck of the woods, when an EDL gang had demonstrated outside a mosque saying, "Go home, clear off, you're all terrorists." And the mosque committee responded by going out with cups of tea. I mean, how British is that? And saying, you know, do you want some tea and biscuits? And these so-called haters actually did, and very soon they were interacting. And I think when you bring ordinary people together, you know, they might look as though they could cause problems, but in the right circumstances, I think we've all got a lot in common and we can all talk.
For me, it's become a very big topic, really, because of the work I do. I found, particularly as you mentioned, Muslim women are targeted because of the scarf, etc. But in particular, I've had difficulty with humanists, for example. I've had 3 run-ins with humanists where one actually was a friend, and first he said, Qaisra, you're intellectual, you're a writer, you've got degrees, how can you believe in God? And then I had the same person putting on anti-Muslim things on Facebook. And that's when it became a critical moment for me. I thought, just because I'm his friend, do I put up with it? This is wrong. So I had to challenge him. I said, this is wrong. And I became in a fighting spirit. And one of his colleagues still, through all that slanging match between us, he said, I'll go on hating a Muslim. So that was one. Second case was on a train. We're sitting together, me and this guy, we got talking. And then he talks about Muslim women. And you know what? He was talking to the wrong woman. I have interviewed 100 Muslim women from across the world, and what I've discovered is every single Muslim woman is unique. She's a product of a world, her education, her class, her everything. And he was saying Muslim women are oppressed. That's all he wanted to hear. And he actually took his card away from me because he couldn't stand it. Then there's another third woman, another humanist. She went on and on about Muslim women and the veil. It was so bad that I almost felt like throwing her out of my car because she really went overboard. So for me, that is a real challenge, a humanist challenge, where they really are out to slam Islam, Muslim women. And it's like addressing them. And this festival is a way of addressing it. I'm a feminist, I believe in women's rights. And as a woman who's leading it, I ensured that this is full of women. You saw that yourself. Women represented the ceremony. My volunteers, 80% of those. And that is part of a strategy to get rid of some of the stereotypes about Muslims and Islam.
In my case, I think the problem that I had was that every time there was an attack, I almost felt as if I needed to apologize. I didn't do it. And these people, whoever these nonsensical, pathetic human beings, do not represent me or my religion. And every time, you know, you instinctively, I'm visibly a Muslim. And some kind of a person who has used the wonderful phrase, Allahu Akbar, by creating atrocities and horrible acts. And that is supposed to represent me. And I almost felt as if I needed to say something. And then eventually, I just thought, no, I don't. So when these atrocity took place at London Bridge and so on, I thought to myself, no, what we need as a community, as a Muslim brethren, is to have sabr, is to have actually stop and breathe and realize that actually, no. So I created a painting called Sabr. And to me, that is one thing that we actually need to do. I am not going to apologize for idiots because they don't represent me. So for me, that is an important thing. And whenever now there has been, like even with the arena, I created a painting which is hanging at I think the town hall, which shows the bee and so on. No, I'm not going to apologize. That idiot has as much harmed me as he has harmed John or Peter or whoever it is. So I think that, to me, is something that really makes me mad.
It's interesting because there are people who want to deny the existence of Islamophobia and say that that racism exists, but there's no such thing as specifically anti-Muslim hatred. But the examples you're all giving, you know, Yvonne, it's to do with your being visibly Muslim at that time, that what you were wearing, and the man on the train who liked you until he realized what your faith was, and then people expecting you to apologize. I find it's very sad, but I cannot believe that there are still people in 2019, 2020 who want to you know, pretend this is not a thing.
There is a lot of racism amongst our own different communities. So while we are the victim of Islamophobia, we also have to challenge our own communities, our own selves, because we could be anti-Semitic, we could be against African, we could be against Asian, we could be against anybody. So really, we need to work with our own communities. Absolutely, there is racism across all communities. So Islamophobia is one part of it, but really racism, discrimination is a very big picture.
The big issue I have is
the
fact that we are not united as an ummah.
Absolutely.
That is a huge thing.
Absolutely.
You know, when I was publishing books, I used to get asked, are you a Sunni publisher or a Shia publisher?
That's right.
And I just said, I'm a Muslim publisher. I didn't realize there was a difference. You know, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Full stop. What is wrong with people?
That's
you know, I agree with you completely. We do need to address that.
You've really hit on something there, because within our own community we do tend to try and put people in boxes, and we've got to stop doing that as well. And you know, racism is a problem, not just in our community, in this country. You know, we have a situation at the moment which has been dominating the headlines, and whether people are prepared to accept it or not, Meghan Markle has been the target of racism, absolutely vile racism. And when it is affecting a couple that who are seen as being very privileged, having to flee the country, having to think about uprooting and moving, you can see how harmful and how hurtful racism and any form of hate is.
What would you like to convey to your audiences about Muslims and about Islam, you know, in your painting, in your journalism or writing, fiction?
I would love to say just how amazing Muslim women are. And when people tell me about the golden age of Islam, I'll say to them, you know, at that period in time, Muslim women were standing shoulder to shoulder with Muslim men. And that is when we had the greatest inventions, the greatest scientists, engineers, writers, artists, poets, just as such a productive period in the Muslim world, which actually triggered the Renaissance in Europe, which I mention in one of my books. But it was a period where women were right next to the men. And I think, you know, you look at the Arab League and all the major rulers when they get together, and it's wall-to-wall men. And I think that really the time has come, women need to become more prominent on the political landscape. And, you know, there's Finland has 5 female leaders. I don't think we're ever going to read about Finland invading any country or dropping bombs on any country, or, you know, they'll be too busy coming up with other ideas. And I just think that instead of trying to save Muslim women, which is what we seem to be, you know, described as being oppressed, I think that we really need to stand up and reclaim our position back alongside the men, and reclaim Islam, and just, you know, marvel at this rich, untapped resource that we have in the Muslim community that are our women.
I would say, as a woman and as an artist, I would very much like to make women artists visible, in the Islamic art field. At the moment, my biggest problem is the fact that we are not visible, and we do this to ourselves, not only from the outside, but we do this to ourselves as well by not supporting each other. So the first thing that we do need to do is work together by just bringing each other up rather than trying to, cut each other off. So that would be my most important thing that I would say should be done.
My message would be really remind people who are non-Muslims, say Islam means peace. And our very first greeting, Assalamu alaikum, means peace be upon you. So I say to people, how can a faith be responsible for this when the word is peace? Peace be upon you. Millions of people say that. So that's one thing. The other thing is to remind people how totally diverse we are. And Muslim heritage is the most enriching because we have our own cultures, our heritage, our monuments. So for me, I'm really proud of being a Muslim because we've got so much to show off, as you can see for yourself. Totally rich in heritage, basically.
Can I pick up on what you were saying about visibility? Because you also mentioned it in the panel before last.
Yes.
And I find it very interesting. So you've talked about the difficulty, especially for Muslim women, about breaking into the visibility within the art world. Yvonne, you were just talking about lack of visibility of women in the Arab League. In the book as well, you talk about how when you put on the burqa, you become invisible. And then I was struck by your visibility really with the awards and this MACFEST. And so it's kind of weren't you the number one, most influential woman in Manchester and things like this? I mean, so I'm just interested in how at once a Muslim woman can be invisible but hyper visible, and I wondered if you had any thoughts.
Well, I have a love-hate relationship with the burqa. When I put the burqa on, it was like putting on Harry Potter's magic cape. I really did become invisible as far as people around me were concerned, which was brilliant for an investigative undercover journalist. I was able to move around without anybody bothering to take any notice. But I also think that the burqa enabled men in that part of the world to be quite brutal because they just saw a shape and they couldn't see a human underneath the burqa. And so it was all too easy, I saw, when pushing people out of the way and brutalizing them and using whips, these invisible women under this all-enveloping blue cloth. It was easier just to hit them or whip them out of the way. So it was. It's a cultural garment. It again has to do with Islam, and I did interview a burqa seller in Kabul a few years ago, and he said that his family had been selling them for generations, his great-great-great-grandfather, and he said that in the early days they used to have burqa trousers as well. This is long before the Taliban, so the burqa's been around for centuries, and it's more of a cultural garment. It also is brilliant at keeping the dust off your clothes, when there are dust storms in Afghanistan. But I do have, as I say, this love-hate relationship with it.
Would you like to say a bit more about this visibility question?
Well, the thing is, as an artist, Islamic art is seen as something on the fringes, all right? As me, visibly a Muslim, from my own Muslim community, I am seen as someone who is, well, will she be that good? I mean, look at the way she's dressed. I'm not in a business suit. I'm not this. I don't look like a high-flying, super-duper artist with, totally made up or whatever. So there is two things. This my garb makes me visible in terms of, okay, she's a Muslim artist, or she's a Muslim, okay? But she can't be that good. I opened the door once to someone selling coating for houses. And the gentleman said, you know, can I talk to your husband? And I said, why? What is this all about? And he said, well, you know, we've got this really wonderful coating for your house, and you know, I'd like to speak to your husband. And I said, why do you want to speak to my husband about the coating on my house? And he said, well, he's the one who makes the decision. I said, not in my house, he doesn't. And I thought to myself, because you know, when I opened the door, I quickly went to get my scarf, and I had, my hands were all full of flour, and he probably sort of thought, she's definitely not one wearing the trousers in this household. So there is this perceived thing that I must be of a certain type, you know, so that's something that we need to break down. Yeah.
Through my research from 100 women, I found every single woman was different. For example, in Indonesia, they all had a headscarf but tight jeans and trousers. In India and Pakistan, shalwar kameez, some will cover the hair, some will drape it out, they're all different. In Germany, they're different. In England, they're different. So really, dressing is cultural, it's nationalistic. We cannot say this is better than the other. I find it very judgmental. Every woman is unique. And for me, it's an equality issue. Some people say, why is she wearing the burqa? I said, that's her right. It's her right. She should dress the way. And similarly, if she doesn't want to wear the headscarf, that's her right. No one has license to dictate to someone else. You know, every country is different, every woman is unique, so, but yet we get stereotyped with the veil all the time. And I think with this festival, one of the things we've done is try to make Muslim women visible as much as we can.
I've got one more question, and then I'd like to open it up to the audience. So I just want to pick up on you did use the word feminist, so that made me wonder if you would all describe yourselves as feminists or not, and what you think the relationship between feminism and Islam, how compatible are these things?
I consider myself a feminist and have done since I can remember. I was brought up in a County Durham coal mining village, and the treatment towards women was shocking. I would go to my careers master, and he would say, what do you want to be? And I'd say, I want to be a journalist. Well, you said that last year. Yes, sir, because I want to be a journalist. And it was just get out. You know, as far as he was concerned, I wasn't worth investing any time on. And so having gone through the 70s and 80s and fighting for equality, people were surprised when I became a Muslim. And I said, I've looked into this faith very closely, and the Holy Quran makes it crystal clear that we women are equal in spirituality and worth. And I said, do you really think I would embrace a faith that is going to propel me back into the 70s again, where I've got to have all of these fights all over again? Of course not. I know that some people, when I say I'm an Islamic feminist, bristle, but you know, that's their problem. I don't care what you call me as long as you treat me equally, and which is within our faith as well, and that makes it crystal clear that I am an equal with any human being.
I would completely agree with what you're saying, Yvonne. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're going to call me. Am I a feminist? Am I a whatever it is you want to call me? One thing that I am sure I am, and that is I am an equal but different. I don't want to be able to lift a heavy load. Why should I? That's what I my husband's doing. It doesn't mean, no, but it really does not mean that he's any better than me, or, you know, whatever role that I decide. I cook in the family because I enjoy cooking. It doesn't make me oppressed, you know. So this word feminism sometimes is a stick that is used to beat us with, you know. Just I do not like to be labeled. I am a feminist. I am whatever it is. Yeah, a womanist, a motherist. I don't know. I don't know even there is such a word as that. But I love being a mom. I love cooking for my family, and I can put up a shelf. So what, you know? But in terms of what Islam has done for us, you know, people were burying females before the Prophet ﷺ came. So, you know, if the wife of the Prophet is the one who proposed to the Prophet, and she was a lot older than him. So, you know, hey, you've got a lot to catch up with if you're talking to me about feminism.
Exactly. And
I would echo all of that. I think my mission has always been fighting for women's rights. I've done it through education, lifelong learning. I found education is a passport to a better life. And for me, I use a quote, one woman's ability to write a name for the first time is equivalent to another woman's PhD. Little steps really matter. So education is very important empowerment is very important. And I use my novels and drama series as vehicles to talk about these issues, etc. We'll hand you to the questions now.
yes, so I'm sure there are lots of questions. So if you just raise your hand, I think there should be a mic coming around. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Abdul Aziz. Thank you very much for coming to Manchester as well. And the talk is very important as well. And as Sister Yvonne said it, the woman is almost 50% of the population. And the Prophet ﷺ, one of the example, the best example of woman is his wife Aisha, radiallahu anha. She is the blessed, our mother. And there is almost 1,000, almost 2,000 hadiths. If it wasn't for Aisha, we would not never hear them, especially about matters of family. And the companions, they have no shame. She used to be the mufti. She gives fatwa in Medina. She was a knowledgeable person in Medina in matters of women. For they go to her and ask her for her opinion regarding this matter or that. The other thing which I remind myself is Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anh, the third caliph, when a person, a Muslim was actually complaining about his wife, and he went to complain to his house, and he heard the wife of Umar raising her voice with Umar radiyallahu anh. As he saw that, he came back. For Umar caught him, said, come back. What did you come for? He said, I came to complain about my wife, but I heard your wife was raising her voice. I said, we are all in the same boat, for therefore let me go. He said, why? Wait. She is my wife. She's the mother of my children. When I'm ill, she look after me. You said about cooking. He said, she cooks for me. Okay? And we say, before you are wives and husbands, she's your sister in Islam. Even you might not like her, but be just with her. And this is a very important message. And women in Islam had a very big impact on society. And because we are talking about culture and education, as Sister she said, the first university who built it is Fatima al-Fihriya in Al-Qarawiyyin in Fez in Morocco. She's the first woman to build a university in the world. And that's for it. It says everything about Islam. Islam has never ever stopped actually anybody to come forward, whether women and men. And of course, I just end with a joke, because I marry people as well. So one sister said, Brother Abdul Aziz, I'm looking for a husband. I said, okay. Said, I have one condition. Said, what is your condition? He said, I like was my future husband to cook for me. So I said, don't make it actually an issue. If you cannot cook for each other, just order takeaway, and that you sort out. Assalamu alaikum.
That was a great comment, but can we keep them short and have them as questions from now, please? Anybody else? Yes, there's a gentleman.
Assalamu alaikum. Yesterday it was a lovely history day for a British Muslim, Samira Ahmed. She won her case. What's your reaction, please?
Samira Ahmed winning her discrimination case against the BBC?
Oh, absolutely delighted, absolutely delighted, definitely.
Delighted, but very sad that the BBC felt it necessary to take her to court.
Absolutely.
For what was an issue, quite blatant issue about
racism, I think.
About equal rights in pay. So no, it was great to see her victorious. So yes, it was a good news day.
It was mentioned on the radio to support what you're saying, not only because she was a woman for equal matters, but of course, to state the obvious, she was a member of the ethnic group.
Oh, that's okay then.
So that's what's so valuable about today. Thank you.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, just a very light one. I'd like to hear the view of the panelists on contemporary feminism. Where does it lie at the moment? What's the state of feminism at the moment, not just in this country, but I suppose around the world? And specifically with regards to Britain and the West, where does contemporary feminism stand in relation to current woke culture and the vexed question of what constitutes a woman? So a lovely light question there for you. Tread carefully.
I have been avoiding answering that question for the last 2 or 3 years. It is ripping apart the feminist community. People like Germaine Greer are being no-platformed. And I would say let's focus on what unites us, not what divides. It's very important. Women's rights, I've been fighting since the 70s, and I do not want to see any women's rights eroded at all.
And I mean, if I may, as chair, exercise chair's privilege to say something a bit academic, which is that in '89, Kimberly Crenshaw came up with the idea of intersectionality, which speaks very well to the issue that was just raised about Samira Ahmed, where we have to look at the different oppressions coming together that contributed to her low pay, I think. I don't know what others think.
I would agree very much with what Yvonne said, and that is, I think, let's look at women's rights across the board, not only from sort of an Islamic point of view, and let's just see what actually is more common amongst us than what divides us. I agree with you completely, Yvonne.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. But just to remind ourselves, I mean, it's a very generic question. What women's rights are in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, they're different from England, so we need to remember the context we're talking about. Another question?
Maybe one more question, if anyone has one. Yeah.
I was just going to say, if you had one more chair, which sort of politician would you like to have to discuss? Because without a political act, some of these changes are never going to be able to take place.
Well, we are invited Saida Warsi tomorrow. Islamophobia, for me, she's a wonderful example, really standing up for us, for the community, for Islam, for discrimination, for Islamophobia. So we would love to have her. She was here last year in conversation. She's coming tomorrow. So that would be my number one choice in England at this moment in time, somebody who's really making a difference, but struggling at the same time. It's a tough life she's leading. A man. Ooh, a man.
Because I think it's important.
Yes.
To sort of, so who do you think would be the male politician?
Anybody else?
Well, I think I can't think of a particular name, but an interesting speech that I heard was from Riz Ahmed, the actor, when he said that as Muslims we need to be represented in all sectors in society. So I can't think of anyone in particular, but I think we do need to have diverse panel members, you know, from the police, from, you know, all sections. So.
Yeah, I was just interested to know who you felt was valuable in terms of male or female politicians who are of the Muslim faith, really.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's a question which we need to kind of think about a little bit.
But I think that's sad then that there aren't obvious politicians who you, except for, I agree, there aren't loads of politicians who you would wish to be actually speaking there who are doing enough.
Well, there are
politicians aren't.
We've got 3 coming tomorrow: Saida Warsi, Naz Shah, and Afzal Khan. You know, they're coming tomorrow. They're politicians, and they're doing a really good job for us. Okay.
Speaking about women, I would have automatically said Saida Warsi because she has been quite fearless in bringing her own party to account. And so I would say, but of course she's coming tomorrow. And the other one who is quite fearless but quite different in her approach to Saida is Naz Shah.
Yeah, she's
who
coming
again,
tomorrow.
you know, she's a woman who goes straight for the jugular, but, you know, with good reason.
Absolutely.
And
please, everyone, come tomorrow. This is my plug for tomorrow.
So
they're all coming tomorrow.
that you know, seeing them share the same platform is going to be quite something tomorrow.
So on that, you really must come tomorrow and to the rest of the festival. I think this has been a brilliant panel and a taste of what's to come. I want to thank our 3 speakers who've been absolutely fascinating. So Qaisra Shahraz, Siddika Juma and Yvonne Ridley. Let's thank them.